There we go. Okay, we're live. Great.
Great. June can mute now. There we go.
Okay, great. Well, welcome to our October Curriculum Committee meeting. We have, I think, 2 informative presentations today and a couple of informational items towards the end of the agenda. But we're really looking ahead already towards planning for next year in the context of our current goals and objectives. Dan's going to first talk about our current middle school teaming model to kind of lay the foundation of what we currently have as a structure at the middle school and how we are thinking about enhancing that for the following year. He's going to come back in November, December, and talk about where we think we could go. He's working with his team right now, but we're really looking to enhance, if you think about our goals in math, goals in literacy, our core academics and specials, trying to enhance the achievement in those areas and the experience for students. And can we think about the structure a little differently? And then Liz is going to join us afterwards, and we're going to have an update on, and I think, when we talk about music, we're really cutting over into that social emotional realm. For many students, music is their passion, and it's a great outlet for them. So Liz is going to give us an update on where we are and where we're going with our curriculum renewal. And these are 2 areas we're going to continue to give you updates this year, and we look forward to your questions. So Dan's going to cue up his presentation. And, this is an area that's near and dear to me. I sat in Dan's seat once before as a middle school principal. So I understand, the challenges, constraints of a schedule, but how a schedule and the structure of teaming at the middle school can help you achieve your goals, with our adolescent learners. So, Dan, you want
to? Okay, let's see.
And all these items are either currently posted. They're all currently posted on BoardBook.
I don't know if you're seeing the right screen.
We're not seeing any screen.
Okay, you're not seeing any screen. Sorry about that.
That's okay. We did for a second, and then it
I think that was the wrong version. I'm trying to get to the right version of my screen. If I can't, we may have to go to a different version, which is the PDF version. All right. All right. Now this should be the right one.
Okay.
Okay. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Middle school philosophy? All right.
Yep.
So once again, just thank you for this opportunity to speak with you all about the middle school, what the middle school philosophy is. And I say middle school philosophy to kind of juxtapose that with a traditional junior high model. The junior high model sort of assumes that these early adolescents are simply smaller high school students and is arranged around strict departments and students just going from class to class, department to department without any supportive teaming model, which sets the middle school apart. And I'll talk more in detail about the teaming model and its goals and its impact. But the middle school philosophy does believe that these critical middle years in education are an important bridge between the elementary school models, where typically 1 or 2 teachers are responsible for all of the core academic areas. And that's reflected even by the certification that teachers have at the elementary level, as opposed to secondary level, where teachers get certified in content-specific areas in the core academics. So it does bridge those years between elementary and high school. It allows children room to grow with support, and it's the support of that team of teachers that I'm going to speak about in a few moments. And it's a time when students are encountering increased expectations. There's more independence. They're not walked from class to class as they might be at the intermediate school. They have lockers that they're responsible for. We expect them to be more self-advocates, and obviously talking to them a lot about respect, self-discipline, and I would even say emotional regulation. So again, the complexity of the middle school child is that they are going through more developmental changes at any time in their life, except for really infancy. And the big distinguishing characteristic here is that they're fully conscious and aware of all of these changes that are taking place. They're growing, they're usually reaching puberty during this time period. So their hormones are making their body and their brain change. It's an emotional roller coaster. There's a lot of pulling away from the family and the parents as being the primary focus of their attention to their peers. There's a lot of energy, and as we know, they're still not fully developed in terms of their brain development. So judgment and decision-making skills are not yet intact, and we expect students at this age level to make some poor choices, and we're there to help them learn from them and move forward. So let me talk a little bit more about the teaming approach, which is really the key factor of a middle school. It's what separates a middle school from a junior high. And this quote here, I'll let you read it for yourself unless it's helpful. I don't know if I read it, maybe it is helpful. Putting teachers with complementary knowledge and skills on a team results in amassing talent that exceeds the capabilities of any single teacher. Teams of teachers can be more responsive to changing events and demands that an individual or an entire institution could. So the idea here is that by putting a team of core academic teachers, an interdisciplinary team of teachers, and by that we usually are talking about English, social studies, science, and math. By putting them together and having them share the same group of students, they can get to know those students well. They can plan instruction, often interdisciplinary units of instruction that can reach those children, meet their needs, and end up with much stronger results than any single teacher might do on his or her own. And just the words there, innovators and inventors, those are the names of our 2 6th grade teams. So the impact of teaming on students, first of all, it takes what could be a large middle school and breaks it down into a smaller community of learners. It fosters a sense of belonging and provides consistency of expectations. I know that our students appreciate the fact that their teachers coordinate things such as assessments. There's a common team homework calendar. Teachers will plan community meetings to foster that sense of belonging, and even the physical location of where their core classes are located is in a certain area of the building, so they can take ownership of that part of the building. And I would even say this year we've had students in our Student Government Association and others who have taken to decorating the bulletin boards in that area to give it a sense of ownership. For parents, the impact of teaming is also felt through communications that come from the team leaders. It's access to teachers and counselors. We have a system here at the middle school where we don't wait until district-wide conference days in November or in the spring. We have time set aside for our teams of teachers to meet on a weekly basis and to have parent conferences as needed throughout the year. So again, the philosophy here is that teachers and parents have stronger communication because of the teaming model and can work together to meet the needs of their child. The impact of teaming on teachers, again, we set aside time in the schedule where the core team of teachers have common time. They don't just have common time to meet with their curricular partner on the other team. They also have time to meet with the interdisciplinary team. They meet weekly to discuss the needs, academic needs, social emotional needs, and behavioral needs of their students using what we call the Hands Up protocol. That's a protocol where the team of teachers actually goes through their team roster and talks about every single child. Each child's name is read, and any teacher who has noticed a concern about that child will raise their hand. That's why it's called Hands Up. And they will say whether it's an academic, social, emotional behavior concern. The team will then go back, talk in depth about that concern, and suggest interventions or strategies that might be used and that they can all use consistently to help improve performance or meet that child's needs. The grade level counselor also attends those weekly Hands Up meetings. There's an additional meeting each week where the core team of teachers meet to discuss and plan team-wide programming. This might be field trips, community meetings, student recognition. For example, at the middle school, we have a Spotlight Student of the Month, and each team will nominate a student, or 2 students actually per team, and they're recognized on our morning show. They're recognized in our hallway with a certificate posted in a display case, and then we're giving a certificate to the student to take home as well. And we often highlight the character values for which they're being highlighted or nominated. Other activities during the team meetings include coordination of homework, assessments, again, planning interdisciplinary units of study. All of that can take place during team meetings. And like I mentioned earlier, we also provide weekly time for a team conference with parents or guardians. So as Dr. Craw mentioned, we are looking already towards next year and the impact of declining enrollment. When I started at the middle school 7 years ago, the board at that time charged me with really looking at enrollment trends and how we could continue to have a middle school model as we continue to experience the declining enrollment. Fortunately, the declining enrollment didn't happen as quickly or as dramatically as I think was forecast even 7 years ago. But for most of those years, we had 9 sections, which resulted in 1 large team. A full team would, under our current staffing model, has 5 sections, and that left 1 team for many years with only 4 sections. So the way we've been dealing with that situation up until now is by assigning the core academic teachers on the small team to teach off grade level. So we were able to retain full-time employees and have, highly qualified, certified teachers teaching the content area, but it has resulted in an erosion of our teaming model. It's been very challenging. Drew Walters, the assistant principal, and I have worked very carefully with our scheduling so that we could still allow teachers who ended up being actually on 2 teams to attend team meetings on both teams. But there still was really a home team for that teacher and then the additional team that they were working on. And just to give you a little bit more color there, because I think this is the crux of the challenge we're facing moving forward when we expect next year to have 8 sections at each grade level. Currently, we have 8 sections in 6th and 7th grade, but still have 9 sections in 8th grade. It really does become both a staffing challenge and a scheduling challenge for us. But as I said, right now on one of our teams, everybody on that team has the same science teacher, but for the other core academics, it's going to be they may have a teacher from a different grade level. that team has, most of them will have the same English teacher, but since it's a double block of English in 6th grade, there is a 7th grade English teacher who's rounding that out. We have a teacher on the small team in 8th grade and a teacher on the small team in 7th grade in the other academic areas, rounding out that team. So I think I didn't really read through those bullet points, but I think I touched on all of those.
So Dan, can you leave that one back up there?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I was going to stop sharing, but let me go back.
If it's
this
easier.
One, can you see it even if it's like this, or do you want me to go back to presentation mode?
We can't see anything now, but that's fine. You can leave it down. Oh. It doesn't matter. So what I'm hearing then is that the smaller team, the declining enrollment has impacted teams in the following 2 ways. One, that the smaller teams have some teachers who are teaching across teams and across grade levels.
That's correct.
And I'm not sure that has a big impact with respect to parents. It probably has more of an internal impact, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about what impact you think it's having.
So thank you. You're probably right. I think it is more of an internal concern for both the teachers and perhaps for the students as well, because they now are dealing with more teachers, which is more like what they would encounter at a high school, or different teachers. So I guess they have the same number of each individual student has the same number of teachers, but it's no longer a shared group of students with a certain team of teachers, a small set of teachers. I think for the staff, the challenge is, you're dealing with, if you're on the small team, I think it's a bigger burden as a teacher, because you are then teaching, multiple preparations, multiple grade levels, different content and curriculum. But I think looking forward, even the bigger challenge is more of a staffing issue. If we lose the ability to retain full-time teachers, I think that's a risk for Weston, or at least for the middle school. I think if we can no longer offer full-time employment to these teachers, we may lose teachers to other schools. That would be my concern. How do we retain our high-quality staff if we don't have full-time positions for them? Right now, we've been able to make them full through this way of trying to also preserve some sense of teaming, but it's just no longer the same.
If I may interject here, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm sorry. I think that what we're really looking at is that due to the current enrollment situation, and we need to be very planful in how we provide the best possible academic programs for our middle school students, and how to structurally design teams in such a way that, yes, they're getting academics, that the teams are balanced, that we also look at the different interventions and other things that we are providing, and looking at the overall structure to see if there, quite frankly, is a better way to organize this and keep it pure teams. I mean, when you talk about, well, we'll lose teachers, that could, yes, be an unintended consequence. But I just want to remind everyone that, we look at the enrollment across the board, especially 6-12 across the board, and decisions are made every year on how to ensure that the best possible teacher is matched with the best possible academic courses. We have movement between the middle school and the high school. So to be able to have more fidelity within the team, and be able to have the teachers that are on that team working with the students to provide, whether it's additional academic intervention, and that, I think, is a win-win, because they know those kids and they're at those team meetings, instead of, for example, perhaps an interventionist that might be shared across multiple grades. So we have to figure out a way, quite frankly, how to restructure this and do it better through the lens of our academic return on investment. to make sure that we have the best possible program, keeping in mind, obviously, the cost of this program. How can we leverage and maximize the staff that we have to, frankly, have more fidelity around the teaming structure?
Yeah, I mean, I think we look at academic outcomes and we are reflecting and asking ourselves the question, can we better support the goals that we have outlined this year going forward with math, with literacy, and with other subjects by better structuring and using and leveraging our teams? I mean, currently we have one team with about 100 plus students, Dan, correct? And another team with about 60 plus students. If you're on the large team, you have the same 4 core academic teachers. If you're on the small team, if you're with the 60 plus students, it's nice to be on a small team, but you don't have the same core group of teachers. And so things like common planning time, common meeting time around those students, very hard to pull those people together to get the enhancements if someone is having an issue, or that parent communication piece to get all of those people to the table becomes more challenging. Another factor that we're looking at that, Dan, I think is important are the length of the classes at the middle school. We are 42-minute periods, correct, Dan? 42-minute periods?
Yeah, roughly. Because of COVID, we've made some slight adjustments for mass breaks, but that's, the average is 42.
Right. So when we think about literacy, math, science, social studies, and just the frenetic pace of a middle school schedule, and this is a challenge of middle schools all across, is how do you get everything into, we've got a limited period of time, but, the real sweet spot is really trying to get at that 50-minute or above or longer blocks in some way at a middle school to go more in depth into content. So, we're really trying to set the stage here of just kind of, here's what we're dealing with. Here's some of the challenges. We understand the constraints as we go into budget season. So we're trying to work within the resources and constraints that we have, and looking to see, can we create some enhancements, number one, to address the peer teaming, the programmatic needs that we have, the goals that we have, and just the experience, because social emotionally too, when you have a team that is a community, there's a sense of belonging with those students and those teachers, and they get to know kids, being known well by at least one adult. That's where peer team has a real strong influence as well. So
can I ask a weird question? If in a grade level a large team has 100 and a small team has 60, why aren't we
60
okay,
plus?
why aren't we evening those out?
So Taffy, that's a really good question, and some of that comes down to the putting the puzzle together. That when we schedule and when we staff. For example, if I had 2 teams and each of them had 4, then I have to find an extra assignment for 2 teachers now to make them full-time. If that's a concern of retention of teachers and full-time teachers, and that's why we're able to do it up to this point, but this solution, this really creative solution that we've been doing, will not work when I'm at 8 sections across all 3 grades. But if I have, because the teacher on the small 7th grade team, for example, who has 3 math classes in 7th grade, now can pick up 2 math classes on the small team in 6th grade. And then the one math teacher on the small team in 8th grade, who has 4, because they're still at 4 classes, can pick up the remaining 1. So it maximizes staffing. It's very efficient in the staffing, but the payoff is what Ken said earlier. You erode the sense of community. Everything that you're looking for in the teaming model starts to erode when you have now, teachers from 7th grade and 8th grade teaching the 6th grade students on the small team. Did that give enough color? And it's kind of confusing.
Yeah. I mean, I'd have to see the spread chart. I was suspending my disbelief and believing you. And what I'm hearing is and I see Tony wants to say something. What I'm hearing is that right now the priority that we're placing is retaining these full-time positions so that we don't reduce them down to part-time and potentially lose good talent, which I think is critical.
I don't think that's the priority necessarily, but I would say that it was the most, I guess, fiscally efficient way to schedule up to this point. And done in such a way, like I said, very creatively, so that we could at least provide some common time for teachers who were on 2 teams to be with both teams. But that time is limited. It's not, they're not able to do, obviously, three meetings a week on both team levels. I know that Lisa wants to say something.
Go ahead, Tony.
I have a more basic question. Dan, just in terms of this presentation, what are the 3 things that you want the board to take away from this presentation? For us to think about, for us to
like it's the how can we help situation.
So, because there's a lot of there's a number of dimensions here. One is about fundamentally the teaming model. The other dimension is how do you match resources with needs? So there's so many different threads here. What are the most important things that you think we need to take away and work on?
Well, I first wanted to make sure you understood the middle school model and middle school philosophy, and that we value that. We think that is the appropriate way, the best way to educate middle level students. There's a text that I've discussed, with my colleagues that's put out by the Association for Middle Level Education called This We Believe. And we talk about it with our tri-state group, our peers in other districts. And often Marty Brooks, who is the director, will say it shouldn't be called This We Believe, it's This We Know. We know what the right structure is to educate students at the middle school level in a way that truly supports them at their developmental level, that takes into account the importance of social emotional aspects that they're going through at this time, that is keyed into what makes early adolescent learners different from elementary or high school learners, and that is a middle school that is based on a teaming model. So that's the most important thing. The second one is to let you know that I am aware, keenly aware, that our current Band-Aid is not going to work beyond this year. And that's going to have perhaps a budgetary implication around staffing, but it also opens up an opportunity for us to look at how we are doing things and perhaps do them in a different way that can even further our district and our school goals and improve student performance at the same time. We don't have that proposal yet. We first met with our curriculum leaders in the core academic areas last week. We have another meeting with our team leaders and our curriculum leaders coming up. I've been in conversations with our neighboring middle schools about their program and how they structure their middle school. And I'm really excited about some of the opportunities and look forward to developing this plan more in detail and coming back to this group to talk about it. But I think that's how I see it, Tony, right now.
Mm-hmm. When do you expect to come back to this group?
Well, I think we're shooting for November, aren't we, Dr. Craw? November, December? I mean, we're working constantly. You're muted, so I can't hear you.
Yeah, we'd like to continue this conversation, come back to you in November with, I think on paper, what our model looks like now, what are some potential ideas and thoughts and a recommendation ultimately as to what we think will enhance the outcomes for middle school students.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
I have a couple of questions, probably for Dan and maybe for Lisa. So it seems like the teaming model is unique to the middle school, and related to the teaming model, you have staffing puzzles to put together. So as it wouldn't necessarily be for this fall, but as the parallel study moves forward about the facility optimizations, and is it plausible to shut down one of the schools, I would imagine that how the teaming is set up at the middle school for that grade level must play some role in the ability to potentially shut down one of the schools. So as you go through the process of declining enrollment and staffing and the teams, is there some thought or knowledge sharing that's happening so that parallel to what you're doing for potentially fall of 2022, that information would be utilized by the optimization committee or by other committees who are looking at the feasibility of operating 3 schools instead of 4?
I can respond, David. And I know it's premature at this point, but if I just were to speculate, let's say we were configured K4, 5, 8, 9, 12 into 3 buildings. Let's just say, teaming comes in different configurations. You still could have, a 4-teacher team, English, Math, Social Studies, and Science in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And in 5th grade, like we currently have at the WIS, we have 2-teacher teams. We have a literacy and a STEM teacher that work very closely together with those 40 plus students that they share. So within a school, you can have multiple teaming models, different teaming models in various grades. And so, essentially the biggest driver is not so much how many buildings, it's your enrollment that you kind of look ahead 3 to 5 years to see, will your schedule and configuration be aligned with your enrollment.
Okay.
Yeah,
and then,
Dave, I just wanted to add one thing, is that as the discussions around ultimately, the long-term configuration of our campus proceeds, one of the most important aspects of deciding or looking at physical space, looking at grade configurations, is what is the best educational model. And I think that's an important discussion that's still very early days and yet to be had. But I think that's one that's going to go into ultimately an important decision around what the configuration ultimately long-term of our campus looks like, what the building configurations look like. I think the educational model is a big discussion, a big part of that. Yeah.
Precedes it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to clarify one thing that came up earlier, as far as teachers who are teaching 2 different grade levels from one of the early slides that you showed us, Dan, so is there downside to that? I wasn't clear. I think Taffy kind of asked the same question.
Yeah. So what I would say is what we give up when we go to that solution is the ability that's so key to the middle school philosophy of the teaming model, to have that core group of teachers who know those students so well and can meet their various needs because they know them so well, because they're spending so much time together talking about students, sharing their observations about students, sharing what works sharing their tips because they share the same group. When you have a teacher who is teaching 8th grade students for most of the day and only goes down and teaches 6th grade students for one period during the day, not only are they not going to have that, they're just not going to have the opportunity to meet with that group of 6th grade teachers to really benefit from and contribute to those important conversations about students. So it's sort of what I'm saying is you erode the whole middle school philosophy, the teaming model that we know is so helpful and beneficial to students at this age level.
And that's because the teacher who teaches, for example, 6 sections of 8th grade would be potentially exposed to 80 or 100 8th graders every day and 20 7th graders.
That's exactly it. They have 80 students on their team. They're participating in all of those interdisciplinary team meetings with the other core academic teachers and are only available. And that took some doing too. And it's not always perfect. We try to have 3 times a week where these teachers are available to meet in interdisciplinary teams with their team. And that's just not going to be possible. We might be able to eke out 1.
And you do the sharing of the teacher because otherwise you'd either have to hire an additional teacher, which would be to fill. You have these open blocks, and the open blocks aren't enough to sustain a full-time employee. So you wind up with potentially a lot of part-time, which then becomes an issue of staying connected to the district and not losing them versus just filling them in. Okay, understood. Yeah. Thank you.
I had a quick question. When we're talking about the teaming and maintaining the teaming, this seems like such a good opportunity to talk about the schedule too. And is there, I know that's something you're probably going to look at when you propose the new teaming model. I just was wondering how you feel about the current schedule, if there's more blocks available, if we think that might help with teaming. But even aside from teaming, how does our schedule fit as it works now?
Thanks for that question. I'll try to be pretty brief. We did make a modification to our schedule. It was the first modification in many, many years. And we did it about, I want to say 5 years ago. And we looked at many different elaborate possibilities. What we actually ended up with wasn't necessarily all that creative. The benefit of our current schedule is we have a period during the day, an extended learning block. How we're using that, and this is, I think, one of the things that we're looking at maybe in improving on, because about 80% of our students use that time simply as a quiet study. And for teachers, it's not an assignment. It's not a teaching assignment. It's a duty assignment. So they're supervising kids, but they're not technically instructing the kids. Now, the benefit of that, however, is that now virtually all of our students have access to our full program. There was a time when we had students, because they had special needs, or if they were in our talented and gifted program, our project challenge program, that used to be offered only during what we call our PFA block, which is our practical and fine arts block, which there's 2 periods every day, alternating A and B day. So there's only 4 blocks for what would typically be art, music, PE, and a rotation, which is different by grade level, but it often includes, health and sometimes more art, or for 6th graders, technology. Students that were getting strategies classes for special education, students who were given reading support or math support, or these interventions, these students who needed the most academic support weren't able at times to take music, or they weren't able to take art, or they weren't able to take tech and engineering, our Project Lead the Way course. So we solved one problem, or one challenge, I guess. So now our curriculum is basically available to all of our students equally. But I think we have to question whether that quiet study is is the best use of one of our key resources, which is time, if we really would like those students to be more academically engaged. So yes, a schedule would need to be looked at as well as the programming and what we do at that time.
Yeah, so not just that quiet study time, the length of classes. Can you go in depth into learning? 42 minutes by the time you get started. You're really limited. So
prior to our change, we had 49-minute classes. I would say that when I do a survey of the surrounding middle schools, 42 to 44 minutes does seem to be rather typical. But we're all dealing with the same challenges, and all of us would always like to improve and do something. We all say, this is what we're doing. It's not perfect, but this is what we're doing.
Okay, Taffy, we can move on then, unless there's any more questions. All right. Dan, thank you. And I know you're passionate about the middle school and teaming, and we'll look forward to bringing you back to next month to talk more. So let's turn now to music. We've talked quite a bit last spring into this fall about core academic, math, literacy. It is so important for us to think about the arts. This is a town, this is a community that highly values the arts. We have historically had strong enrollment in our music program. And, last year was really tough for students in terms of music, in terms of our ensembles with the physical distancing, the mask and the spacing was such a challenge. I want Liz here to share where we are currently, what the impact of the pandemic was, and leading into, we're in a curriculum renewal cycle now. We're starting a renewal cycle with music. And so this is kind of laying the foundation, much like Dan did with teaming, laying the foundation for the curriculum renewal in music. And so she has a brief, I think it's an interactive presentation. Liz, would you prefer questions at the end or questions as you go along?
I think questions as we go are better. I just know that if I share with you, I'm not going to be able to see you. If I share the presentation on Google Meet, you asked about Zoom or Google Meet. We don't quite know how to, on Google Meet, make it so I can still see you. So if you do have a question, I won't be able to, just so you know, I won't be able to see you. So.
That's weird. There's got to be a way to figure that out.
I'm sure there is. I just haven't used it enough yet to know. So
yeah, gotcha.
Probably a user problem and not an actual.
No, Liz, it's not a user problem.
Okay, so I'm going to. Oh wait, you're presenting to me?
Well, is it easier if I do that? If you wanted to see the group,
I can see everybody. That's great.
Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate that. So we, if you can go ahead and click to the next one. Very often people ask, what our music curriculum is based on, and what exactly we do in our classes. So these are I always like to bring us back to the standards, and I don't know if you've ever seen these before, but these are our national core arts standards. These go across all of the arts disciplines, music, visual arts, media arts, dance, theater arts. So these are the anchor standards. These are the big picture. And what we found as we were going into this pandemic, the area in the performing arts that is the primary standard, the performing standard, was the one that was impacted the most. So you can look to the next one if you guys are good with reading those. So in the last year, we found that we really had a significant impact on our student progress. And it really, there was a variety of factors. We, in the performing area, we were really limited to independent music making. So students were playing at home. We had cohorting last year. So for our ensembles, you would only have, 10, 15 of your students in the class at a time. And in our band classes, we were not playing in school for the majority of the year. So there was all of these different pieces of the puzzle that really made it difficult for us to really move forward along that area. We did focus a lot on listening to other performances and watching videos and talking about, there's a lot of talking about music and just really trying to keep kids connected to the program, because I think that our students enjoy being in the program, and as much as they enjoy talking about music, they really wanted to play and participate, and we just were limited with what we could do. Initially, when the pandemic came through, there were some arbitrary mitigation things at first, where we had this 12-foot spacing. We don't even know where that number came from. And then as the time progressed, there was a couple of studies done, the University of Colorado and Colorado State University, very extensive webinars. I won't give you all of the details, but I did sit through a bunch of those. It was very interesting, but I don't ever need to do that again. It was just on how aerosols travel, and there was obviously a lot of fear initially that that wind instruments were, COVID spreaders and all of that. So we did all of the things that they've told us to do. We've continued to do that, but it has really had an impact on what we were able to do last year. Going into this year, and you can go ahead to the next one. We are not done with the pandemic in the performing arts. So in other areas, there's sort of a return to normal, but we have certainly not had that yet. The way things are now, there really is still a considerable impact on what we're able to do with kids. So we've started to bring back some of the areas where we've seen less progress. And in that performing area, and I just want to make mention that in the performing area, that doesn't necessarily mean public performance. That's all of the things that we do in the classroom. So anything that we do in general music or in an ensemble where students are playing and singing, that's all under that performing strand. So we're starting to bring back some of that basic music literacy. As you know, music is another language, and we are teaching students to be able to, play and sing and be able to read music. So we have to we've gone back a little bit. We've had to dial it back a little. We're just beginning this year to bring back some of that basic ensemble work and beginning technique, but it's very difficult to be able to do that with students when you have a mask on and you're playing your saxophone through a hole in the mask with a bell cover on the bottom of your saxophone. And very often we have to, the embouchure is the place where your mouth goes around the mouthpiece. And we have to see that in order to be able to tell you how to adjust, and we can't. Also in choral singing or in general music, same thing. When we're talking about singing and vowels and placement, very often we say, well, I think your mouth looks like this behind your mask, but I'm not 100% sure. So these are the challenges that we continue to face. And we have continued with listening for analysis and listening to other groups. We've also worked on connecting our repertoire. This is something that came actually from the pandemic, when we're talking about students' personal interests in music. So we've continued with that as well. And we also are starting to work on creating in our digital music classes, but probably won't focus on that this year in our general music or in our performing ensembles. So I've already probably talked a little bit about some of this. Currently, our challenges are that in all of the areas of the curriculum, in fact, we had a meeting yesterday at K-5 during PD where we were kind of reviewing the vertical alignment and talking about that. And I said, let's, in rank order, let's go through and let's look at what we've seen so far this year and determine where the greatest area of needs are. And by the time we had ranked the 4 things, we had pretty much covered the entire K-5 curriculum where the area of need is most, because they just were not able to really do as much with students as they typically are able to. So some of our assessments have shown that we're leveling back quite a bit in our performing ensembles and in our general music classes. Again, our instruction is limited due to the mitigation factors. And right now we're having some difficulty with our facilities in general. We know that this is an issue. It's been a topic of conversation before, but I think that the pandemic has kind of illuminated that fact that our spaces are kind of too small to support the number of students in our program. Just at the high school alone, we have 37 or 39% of our student population is in our music program. So we have a large number of students involved in our program here. And we have our ensemble spaces are pretty small. Middle school also. Our band room at the middle school is very, very small. So we've done some things here to try to help that, but ultimately we're really stuffed in here. It's just there's not enough space for us here. On a positive note, our ensemble enrollment is steady. So we were expecting that students not being able to play their shiny saxophone next to their friend in band class maybe wouldn't continue this year. Like playing at home on Zoom maybe wasn't as exciting as playing with my friends, but we see that we have a pretty steady enrollment in our performing ensembles. And we're beginning to return to implementing some of that performance strand across the board, K-12. Again, working with students, building our community back. We have such a strong program, especially, I think, overall K-12. I think I think that we have one of the best music departments in the DERG. But I also know that to be true because I am involved with a lot of things in our area, and I know that we're probably one of the highest performing music departments in our DERG. We have students involved in all kinds of things outside of the school as well as in the school, and so we're looking forward to trying to get some of those things back in place. And we're also been recently talking about some ideas for some traditional and non-traditional performances. We had no concerts last year. So this year we're looking to possibly do something in Halloween. We typically at the high school do something at Halloween, and we're looking at some other ideas for our other performing ensembles. We don't have the space to be able to do that. Our stage isn't big enough with the requirements for spacing for mitigation. So before I talk about this, do you have any questions about last year, this year with this program before we talk about where we're going as far as curriculum?
I have a quick question. So you mentioned that we're probably one of the top schools in the area for the performing arts, which is great to hear. And so we want to make sure that the students stay engaged. And, that's sort of one of the unique things about Weston, right? And it sounds like to some small extent, the mitigating things that you're doing for COVID haven't affected enrollment or interest. And I kind of want to put the word yet, right? Because, my question is, it's kind of two. One is the mitigation steps that you're taking. Who and whose direction are you following? And then related, what are not necessarily other schools doing, but maybe private groups or out, I know that some kids will do their performing arts and their music in school, and then they have outside help or coaches, or I'm not sure what you call it. I don't have a child who plays an instrument or sing, but what are they doing? And is there, I guess the basis of my question is, we want to keep this unique to Weston and so forth. So are there, what the mitigating right now, it doesn't seem to have a negative effect, but I kind of worry that as kids get into the program, as they enter the middle school, they're going to be potentially not as interested, especially, not having in person, not having ensembles, not having the groups of parents come in and, listen to their kids. I mean, to me, that's kind of the culmination of why many kids do these things. So whose mitigation steps are you following? And do you know what private or non-public school mitigation steps are being done?
Yes. So we are the Connecticut State Department puts out their recommendations for mitigation. Then the local Westport Weston Health Department, we have our COVID team here in the district, and we work together to determine what our needs are as a school district and what works for us. So we are doing what I have found from local areas around us, something very similar across the board as far as spacing and as far as mask wearing. I don't think you're going to find a school district in the state of Connecticut that doesn't have the same situation with students wearing masks while singing. They're in the building. That's the governor. You have to wear a mask when you're in the building. So nobody is doing that in our area, is removing their masks unless they're outside maybe. In some of the, you asked about attending performances?
Well, I guess I kind of asked three questions, but we said the mitigation piece.
I heard that too.
Yeah, it sounds like what might be happening outside the schools is irrelevant because the schools are they're following Governor Lamont's order. So what a private school or even a private for-profit business that might be working with some of these kids, what they're doing in their facilities, it's irrelevant for what the school can do.
Right, but just something to note, I will say that the private for-profit businesses are also following the same safety guidelines, because I don't think anybody wants to be the school that said, all right, everyone take their masks off, and then there's an outbreak there, and that becomes their responsibility. So they obviously care for the safety of their students as well. Yeah. So across the board, I would say that is what is happening as far as everywhere that I know of. As far as audiences are concerned, right now there are no indoor capacity limitations. So people are having concerts. Some places are, some places are not. That is up to the school district to determine whether they're going to do that or not. Do you feel comfortable bringing, 50 people in? Do you feel comfortable bringing 150 people in? So we did perform Shrek last school year at the end of the year in our auditorium, and our students were masked. We have special clear masks, and we had audiences. And at the time, because we still weren't 100% sure what the situation was, we decided to limit capacity for that. So moving forward, we'll make that decision. If we're going to limit audience capacity, that will be our decision, though. That's not like, there's no mandates as far as that is concerned. So that would be something that would be up to us to determine.
Yeah, thank you. My only feedback is that I know that that's the culmination, right? That's what a lot of these students look so forward to, and not just their family, because their family probably is hearing their progression over the course of the year. So having somewhat extended family come in from the outside,
right?
That's something that I'm sure every student looks forward to, and that's be great to be able to get that back.
Yeah. Grandma wants to come see my concert. I mean, that's a big deal.
Yes.
But we have to get them to be able to play first. So that's the thing, because really, we're playing very much. So that's from our instructional perspective. We are just getting started with that in many areas. And we have, beginning students at the, the 5th graders and 4th graders who are beginning instruments during this time as well, where we have the teacher trying to, say, okay, you put the flute behind the mask, and, it's sometimes it's actually comical. If we don't laugh, we might cry. But we are hoping that, things will at some point, get back to normal, because it gets to be just very challenging for our teachers too. And sometimes it builds up with even the teachers. I feel terrible, but this is what we have to continue to do for now, for safety.
Right.
Thank you.
So.
Well, thanks, Liz, for all you're doing. I mean, part of me is like, okay, put all the woodwinds down. Everyone's doing percussion. We're doing a,
right,
big old percussion, let's think laterally and do in the
steel
music
drum
department.
band. Steel drum band. Let's get a steel
right.
drum
Well,
band.
well, I'm kind of being half serious. Like,
right.
Okay, we can't blow into our instruments, so let's do something we can do. And rent all percussions and do some fabulous percussion concert. But I get it. It's just sad. It's sad for the kids. And I think your last bullet here on this showing slide around, SEL, yes, but the readiness for college music programs, and sorry, the other slide you were just on.
Other one.
Yeah, that one. The very last point there. I think that's just really important too. I mean, I feel most for the kids that wanted the team experience of playing with an orchestra at the big end of year concerts. But I also feel for the kids that have an interest in going to college and studying music, although presumably they have after school lessons and things that they're already doing if they're that serious about it. But anyway.
Well, we have students that major in music, but we also have students that minor in music. And we also have students that go into music, management or arts management,
theater,
and theater, and all these. So that's kind of like a big picture. There are a variety of different majors and careers in music.
Okay, Tony.
Yeah, no. Thanks for the presentation. I was wondering, we do have pockets of funds that were available sort of at one time by the state and the federal government, the various plans to help with the reentry, not to be part of our ongoing, operating budget, but I was thinking, are there one-time things that we need to do as part of the reentry here that we can set aside some of those funds for? I don't know. This is probably a question for you, for Lisa, to think about. If there are things that we need to do that are really just one-time expenses to help with students' reentry, that would be an appropriate use of those types of funds. But I think that's probably a good conversation to have with Lisa, with Phil as well, to think about that.
Yeah, we did use some of that money for masks and bell covers last year. Okay. The kids are playing, so I want to just make sure that we're back to playing. We're back to playing together. Yeah. But again, we're masked in bell covers. The wind instrument, unfortunately, it's become a constant focus of conversation, because I think there was a lot of fear there. We know now, based on the studies, that as long as you put these mitigations in, you're in good shape. So we want to keep that. We've not heard of any in the state of Connecticut, any big, huge COVID spread in a band class or anything like that. Hasn't happened anywhere in the state that I've heard of in the past, almost 2 years. So, but yes, I think we use some of that money for that. I think we also have put more money into disinfecting. We do have school-owned instruments. We actually have a large fleet at the middle school and the high school of school-owned instruments. And so when students have to use those, when we start them on a new instrument, or if they have forgotten their instrument and they use that for a little while, theirs is out for repair. There's a variety of different reasons that happens. We send those out for disinfection now, and we send those out for disinfection. Before we, we have the things to clean the insides and clean the mouthpieces and did that ourselves. But now we're not. Those are going to go out to do that. So I think that money goes there as well.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, Liz, it's Bernadette. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the technology in the music and the arts programs. Maybe technology that's changed because of COVID.
Yeah. I'm just coming right back on. Sorry.
No problem.
I'm in a classroom. We're very energy efficient. If you sit still too long, the light turns off. So I'm in a classroom right now. Yeah. So could you ask the question one more time?
Yeah, just a little. I'd like to hear a little bit about technology, maybe technology and how things have changed with COVID, but also, technology and what you would like to do going forward, career possible implications with music or college readiness with technology. And is there a need to do more education or get access to technology? How are we in those kinds of spaces?
So we have two labs that we use. Middle school has a digital music lab that's used for our 8th grade music technology course and for our music lab in the 7th grade. Those computers are, I think, Dan, do you remember when those computers were up?
I'd have to check the records. Off the top of my head, I don't remember.
Yeah, they're using a variety of different software, and they do multimedia type things in 8th grade. I can't remember off the top of my head when those were replaced. And here at the high school, we also offer courses, audio production course, and then we also offer an advanced course, music industry course. So we are in the process of actually rewriting those. They used to be Music Technology 1, Music Technology 2, but we realized that it's not just music technology. It kind of goes more into industry and audio production. What we don't have at the high school, which when we're talking about facilities, we don't have sound recording capabilities, and that we don't have a sound isolation booth. We don't have a space for recording. So as we're looking at, updating our courses and we're talking about careers in music, that would be something that we would be looking for as far as updating our technology. And in general, in our lower grades, K-5, the technology really is, used by the teacher to do a play along with the class, but those are more experiential general music, together in the moment. Students are able to access things through Google Classroom and record at home and submit a recording. But overall, those classes are really more experiential.
Do you think there's space with the technology to address some of the limitations we have with COVID and performing and things like that? Is there some ways we can, until we're back to completely normal, make up some of our lack with some technology?
I mean, we've had students submit things, like as far as instructionally, we've had students submit things digitally to us so that we can hear where they are with their playing. But now that we're back in ensemble, and being, because that's where the biggest, issue kind of is that performing together. They're able to perform together again at that point. In the past, we had even done a couple of those virtual, recording virtual choirs where everybody submit something and then we put it all together. But we found that that's actually just an exercise in the director's ability to be able to manipulate all of the sound files than it is actually in something that, for the students that benefits their playing or their singing. So.
Thank you.
Okay. So I know that Liz is planning to come back with an update on the research and development phase of the curriculum renewal cycle, probably be in the second semester. We're doing the work now with the teachers in the department. I know there were some conversations yesterday as part of the PD day, and we will bring to you information on courses, data on enrollment in the program. We'll give you all of that background information in our next update, as well as what are the current opportunities and recommendations for improvements to the curriculum going forward. So, we did want to sort of just get you oriented to where we are with music, and then, like with middle school teaming, come back so that this is a continued conversation. And in the meantime, if you have questions, certainly, share them with me. I can route them to Liz and get answers for you in the interim if there are additional questions that come up.
Ken, if I could just add very briefly, in the way that it was brought up before, I think the consideration of the facilities is uniquely tied here. The facility is directly related to the instructional components that Liz is talking about. And so I think as we dig into the curriculum renewal process and moving away from COVID, that we have to continue to have those conversations about how the facility impacts our ability to realize those goals.
Agreed, 150%. It just, just this COVID just really illuminated something that we had already known, and we just didn't realize how much the limitation here, in general, especially 612 in our secondary program, which is at the middle school. We have a large program at the middle school also, and here at the high school, just how much the facilities really impact our instruction.
Thanks for sharing that, Julie. And for the background of the committee, Julie has a tremendous background in music as well as a music teacher. Julie, I forget, was it chorus or your area? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So certainly, at the high school, there's support for the arts, and we look forward to the continued conversation. So to be continued. All right. Now I have just a couple of, it's about 10:13. I have a couple of short informational items. And Liz, you don't necessarily have to stay for this. I think we're all set with music.
All right, thank you. Also, Ken, you can turn off presenting now.
Thanks for the
so everybody can see everybody again. All right, bye everybody. Thank you so much.
Okay, so the item on the agenda, information on classroom walkthroughs, really comes back to our conversations in August and September on goal setting. Because if you recall, within the math and literacy goals, we had an action step called classroom walkthroughs. That one of the ways we were going to look at, are the high leverage strategies that we're working on in professional development, or we know are best practices in a subject, if they're happening in the classroom or not, is through classroom walkthroughs. Classroom walkthroughs is a very powerful tool that we have used periodically in Weston, and we have had administrators, curriculum leaders, and teachers involved in doing classroom walkthroughs. And what a classroom walkthrough is essentially a 4-minute snapshot of a classroom, and then you go on to several other classrooms in the building with a set of look-fors, best practices, or things that we are committing to as a department or as a school that we want to see as high leverage strategies in the classroom. And so we do this in a way that it's focused on looking at the students and the learning. It's not about the teacher. We don't write the teacher's name down. It's non-evaluative. We are looking to see what's happening in the classroom. Are the students engaged? Is differentiation happening? Right now, we spent some time yesterday in math looking at how we could infuse some what we call anchor tasks at the beginning of a class, and a walkthrough. Are those anchor task type activities happening? So we're at this phase now where we're focusing our process. We're deciding what are the look-fors as we go in, and we're going to start with math. Lisa really wants to start with the math, and then we'll go broader to walkthroughs throughout other areas, other subjects. But right now, getting in that focus with math, collecting that information, looking at it as a team, teachers, SILs, administrators, and it's not something that is intended to be done to teachers. It's to have them a part of this process, looking at information and seeing what are our successes, what are things we could do to really strengthen practice. And I know Dan and Julie have been a part of this, and in their buildings where they have, in the middle school, an emphasis on differentiation. Dan looked ahead to the future, some walkthroughs related to differentiation. I believe that's in his plan. Julie, with the same token, with formative assessment, with the work she's doing with assessment, same thing. Looking at the range of kinds of assessments being used and the practices related to that. So we wanted to kind of keep you in the loop because, periodically coming back to our goals, the curriculum is important. So I think we can more fully share what we're seeing in walkthroughs down the road. But the fall is the time to kind of get this up and running now. Dan, Julie, anything? Yeah. Go ahead, Taffy.
I just tell me how you document what you see. So we know that observation is a critical part of how we assess our students' progress, and documentation and observation is also, as you're indicating here, a really critical process in assessing our staff's progress and where they need help, et cetera. And presumably Julie, they would, and Laura, et cetera, they would welcome you giving them that critical feedback. But in what form do they get that feedback? How do you document what's working, what's not working? And then how do you quantify it? And it's not about sort of, okay, 50% of our teachers are hitting the mark and 50 aren't. It's not about that. It's about how you individually and as a department say, generally speaking, we're hitting the mark in across the math department, or this particular teacher needs this much support in these ways, and here's how we're going to deliver it.
Yeah, Taffy, and just to make the distinction, classroom walkthroughs are non-evaluative. They're separate from the formal observations or unit observations that we do. But I think Julie can really share how we go around and collect that data and then share it with the department and reflect to them what we're seeing, because that's the key. And
that's the key. That's right.
Right.
That's the key. This is going to sound a little odd to you, but we have 250 clients that we've built and maintained beautiful vegetable gardens for, and it all comes down to the gardeners themselves and how well they're connecting with the client, how well they are overseeing the garden, harvesting at the right time, thinning, pruning. I know I'm off track, but I just thought you'd like to hear what happens in these gardens. And when we walk through when we walk through those gardens, it's not to say you're fired, you're fired, you're fired. It's not evaluative. It means we sit down with each of the gardeners and say, as a general pattern, here's what we're seeing in the garden. And I'm guessing you see it too. Let's figure out a way to fix this. That doesn't feel evaluative to me either, right? Even though we are sharing what's working and what's not working. So,
yeah, it's a great point, and I think in all things that we do in education, what we're trying to do here is mirroring what we're trying to do in the classroom, right? So when we talk with teachers, so yesterday, a lot of our PD at the high school was focused on formative assessment. How do we gain more information about what students know and are able to do? And then how do we take that information and turn it into something useful for the teacher and for the student? How do we help them do what they need to do to improve? So it all comes back to feedback, right?
Right.
That's the crux of formative assessment. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about when we talk about walkthroughs. How do we develop a body of evidence of what's happening? Where are we right now? What are the artifacts that signal us what we're doing right now? And then how do we craft our feedback to move everyone along to the next level of work, right? Because we're always looking at how do we constantly improve. So it's not evaluative. It's not a summative assessment, if you will. There's not a rating or a grade. It's just about auditing. Where are we? What do we need based on where we are? You know, what are the resources that are needed?
Right. How can we
it's all part of a broader process. So I can speak to you a little bit about the walkthroughs that we did back in 2020 prior to our closing down for the pandemic. At the high school, we were focused specifically on looking for certain indicators related to differentiation in the classroom. Specifically, we worked with the program council, which at the high school consists of the building administrators, the CILs, the director of guidance, and the library media specialist. And we crafted a worksheet. It's a one-pager. We were looking for 3 specific things. They were things that teachers signaled to us that they felt they were doing really well relating to differentiation. So we asked the teachers first, what do you feel comfortable with? And then we wanted to kind of assess what that looked like in every classroom. So we picked 3 things. We picked tiered instruction, flexible grouping, varying questions. And we sent everybody out. We took all the SILs, all the administrators, and we sent them out on these walkthroughs. We wanted to hit every department, every classroom. And we were just looking for indicators that these things were happening. So first, what's the body of evidence? What are the artifacts? And then, we used some administrative staff to kind of put it together in a chart. What are we looking at? How often is this actually happening? We went back to the SILs to review, are there particular departments where this is happening more than others? Are there certain kinds of lessons that lend themselves to these strategies, right? So we ask questions about what we're seeing. We reflect on it. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we didn't get to formally complete the process. But once we get to that step of asking the questions and reflecting, it becomes a question of, well, what's the next level of work and what resources do we need to get there? Is there professional development that's needed? Do we need to bring someone in, or do we have experts on staff? Are there materials or resources that are needed in the classroom? Should we be pulling in people from other buildings or people from other departments? And I think in general about how it gets back to the teachers is using the structures that we have. And I'm not talking about evaluative structures. I'm talking about curricular partner meetings. And this is specific to the high school. Curricular partner meetings or coaching sessions with the CILs, department meetings even. Structures that we have to be able to relay, here's what we're seeing. Here are the themes and patterns that we're finding. And again, to circle back and ask the teachers, because they're the ones who are doing this work. So now that you know this, now that we've illuminated these patterns, what do you think you need? What would be helpful to you to hear in professional learning activities? Because I think often we, from a broad sense, we try and fix things by, kind of throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. If we continue to go back to teachers to say, here's what we're seeing, these are the patterns, now tell us, what do you need to get to this level? That's how we move the needle, I think.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Feel free to weigh in. I know you're just embarking on some of
We
this.
are just starting the process, kind of following in the footsteps of the high school with our focus on differentiation this year. At a later date, in the second half of the year, we'll start the walkthrough process. But I did participate when I was the assistant principal at the high school years ago. We did walkthroughs there. And one of the important aspects was to make sure that we collected sufficient data so that the teachers could look at this and say, okay, this is enough data that's representative, and it's not just a few visits with some skewed data. Oh, you just weren't there in the right class or at the right time during the right class to see my wonderful engagement strategies. At the time, I think the focus was on engagement. But so there's keys. I think that we need the staff. I think what Julie said is really the best way to go about this. You want it to be non-threatening. You want it to be helpful and useful. And you want the staff to buy into this so that when you come back with the data, then they can truly reflect on it, feeling that this is valid, representative data of the work that they're doing in the classrooms.
And I just want to add, you know, on that sheet that we crafted, it doesn't say any particular teacher's name. We identified it by department, and I believe only by department, because we wanted to look at patterns within certain content areas, but we didn't want to call out anyone in particular. That's not what this process was. We were looking in a much more systemic sense.
And just the opportunity to share best practices too, you know, what's working really well. It isn't necessarily attributed to any one person, but needs to be shared, you know, across the department.
And across the disciplines, I would add too, we're trying something relatively new this year in our professional learning, where we're making efforts in every session to provide opportunities for teachers to speak interdisciplinarily with teachers of other disciplines, if that makes sense. And the feedback on that has been really positive. It's good to hear what strategies people are using in other departments. That's what we keep hearing. So yeah, we're going to continue along that vein, because we all have information and strategies and resources to share. And sometimes it takes that person in a different department to trigger the thinking and the reflection on that.
And that was paralleled at the middle school just yesterday. We broke out into going back to our discussion of middle school teams, we have those interdisciplinary teams, and they had the conversations and the share out of the differentiation practices that are currently in place, because we wanted to start with what is. I would say, though, I envision, you know, part of our goals and our plans is to have content specific walkthroughs in addition to the broader differentiation walkthroughs that will be throughout the building. I know that we want to identify some best practices in mathematics, for example, as part of our goal setting, and develop a walkthrough protocol, a simple data collection sheet for that. So that's ongoing work.
Last question, and it can be a quick answer. Do the teachers, who walks through? Generally speaking, who walks through? And do the teachers get to see their peers and walk through their peers' classrooms?
That's a great question, Taffy. And initially, it will be administrators and curriculum leaders. We do strive for and look for opportunities where the teachers can walk through as well. Now, we do have some constraints with sub coverage, but with prep periods, things like that, we may be able to leverage some of those time periods, because it really is when a teacher can, you know, whether they're seeing, internalizing some things they see in another classroom, validating practices they've been using, that's when I think classroom walkthroughs is working on all cylinders, when you can see you know, teachers, administrators, shoulder by shoulder, looking at what's happening. Great. Okay, so the other item I had is, and I think you have heard some of it already, was that we just had a professional learning day here. We posted the schedule. Initially, I think we only posted the first sheet of the full schedule. It's actually a 4-page schedule of activities. And you heard there was a significant focus on formative assessment at the high school, at the middle school on differentiation. There were departmental areas of focus. In terms of our math goal, we had a math consultant here at the K-5 level working with both Hurlbut and WIS teachers, specifically on anchor tasks, and anchor tasks are problems at the beginning of a block where they're very open-ended. They have maybe more than one way to solve that particular problem. And we're talking, developmentally at 1st and 5th grade, that's going to look different. But there was a lot of work on that. And I think I saw Laura here. I was going to give her an opportunity to talk K-5. But I really just, what I'll do is I'll share with you the schedules for professional learning, so you can kind of take a look and see what the staff is doing. You can see largely, aside from 2 outside consultants, most of this work was delivered by curriculum leaders and administrators in the system who have a lot of expertise. But at the same time, we do go out and leverage consultants in on these days as well. Our next day coming up is November 2nd, which I will be busy with the Professional Growth Committee, which is a group of teachers and administrators and curriculum leaders planning for the detail activities for that session. And so we continue and hope, and what we're hoping is this work that we see in the professional learning day translates over in our classroom walkthroughs, and we're seeing that applied in the classroom on a regular basis, right? That's the goal, is have that professional learning, and then there's some application of it shortly thereafter. So that's all I had. We do have approval of minutes going back to the last time, and I think June can probably.
June and September, I've read them, and so I'm happy to make that motion. Has everyone had a chance to take a look at the minutes from June and September? And if so, do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Or do we need to do that? I do that every time, Ken, but we don't need to do that, do we?
I think you
Yeah,
do.
we do. Okay.
You have to formally approve them. Yep.
Okay.
June, just checking.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Hi, Bernadette.
I wasn't privy to June, so I did read September. And
Yep. Yep, that's fine. That's
Okay.
totally fine. And I'd happy. Just make a note, June, please, that David wasn't present for the June meeting. I think that's it. Is that it?
And the September minutes?
And could I have a motion to approve the September minutes? I move to approve the September minutes. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you. That was David. And all in favor? Aye, Taffy.
Hi, David.
Hi, Bernadette.
Okay, thanks, you guys.
Great.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. Very informative, very, very helpful. Are we going to circle back on what's a priority for next meeting?
Yes. In fact, we've laid out that we will be coming back on teaming. Also, at Monday night's board meeting, you will be receiving a summative assessment report of data related to Smarter Balance,
Great.
the SAT, so forth. The November meeting, there'll be time to follow up if there's any questions that come out of that meeting that require further discussion. Certainly can have an item to follow up there. And we can go from there and add other things that we think are timely.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody. Move
Thank
to adjourn.
Great. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.